helped pay for my brother's kids to go to private school. Then one day, I found out they were on a beach vacation, and nobody thought to tell me. My mom later said I handled it calmly. But about 24 hours after that, everyone suddenly needed to get a hold of me. I didn't hear about the trip from my brother, or his wife, or anyone in the family. I found out the same way everyone else did scrolling through Facebook. There they were in a luxury beach town, matching white outfits, perfect smiles, standing in the sand. The caption talked about being grateful for family time. The location tag said Florida. They had already been there for 5 days. 5 days. 2 weeks before that, I had wired my brother $4,000 to help cover my niece and nephew's private school tuition. At no point did anyone mention a vacation. Not Ryan. Not his wife, Kayla. Not even my mom. When I called her, she sounded genuinely confused about why it bothered me. She said, "It's not really your thing." I asked what she meant by that. She said it was beach houses, kids running around, couples hanging out. Then she added, "You're busy. We didn't think you'd want to come." I didn't bring up the money right away. I just said okay and ended the call. But here's the part that really matters. For the past 3 years, I'd been helping pay for their kids' private school. Mason is 10, Leia is 8. Ryan told me Mason was getting bullied at public school, and Leia needed extra academic support. He said the private academy was smaller, safer, and better for both of them, but the tuition was overwhelming. He told me they were short about $8,000 a year. I didn't even think twice. I have a steady job in Chicago, no kids, no big expenses besides my mortgage, so I offered to cover half. He thanked me like I'd rescued them. Every semester after that, he'd send me the tuition statement. I'd wire $4,000, sometimes more when extra fees came up. He always talked about how tight money was, how he was picking up extra shifts at the auto shop, how Kayla started selling candles online to help make ends meet. And I believed him. Over time, there were little things that didn't quite make sense. A brand new couch showed up in their living room. Ryan put custom rims on his truck. Then there was a weekend concert trip out of town. Every time he had an explanation ready. He said they got a great deal, or it was financed, or a friend had helped out. I never really questioned it. After seeing the beach photos, though, I finally decided to log into the school's payment portal. I was listed as an authorized payer, but up until then, I'd only ever looked at the balance due. That's it. This time I noticed a tab called Account History, so I clicked on it. My payments were all there. The transfers I recognized, plus a few smaller ones. But there was something else too, scholarship credits. 2 of them, both merit-based. Each kid had scholarships covering almost 30% of their tuition, and they'd been applied for the past 2 years. I read it once, then I read it again, and then I noticed another line. A hardship appeal approved, which meant Ryan had told the school they were struggling financially. I opened my banking app and added up every transfer I'd sent over the last 3 years. When I saw the total, my hands actually went cold. With those scholarships in place, he wasn't paying half. He wasn't even close. I didn't call him, I didn't text. Instead, I emailed the school's finance office and asked for a full breakdown of tuition, financial aid, and how payments had been applied over the past 3 years. Just professional. Straight to the point. The next morning, I woke up to 6 missed calls from Ryan, 3 from my mom, 2 from Kayla, and an email from the school titled Account Clarification. That's when it hit me. They knew I had seen something. And for the first time, they were the ones panicking. The email from the school was short and polite. It confirmed everything. Both kids had received merit scholarships based on testing and academic performance. Together, those awards covered just under 60% of the total tuition. On top of that, Ryan had submitted financial hardship paperwork every year, which reduced the remaining balance even more. After all the adjustments were applied, the actual out-of-pocket tuition each year was less than what I alone had been sending. I went over the numbers 3 times just to be sure. For the past 2 years, my transfers had covered almost the entire tuition bill. Ryan's contributions were small, a few minor payments here and there, nowhere near half. And the hardship appeal required tax documents, which meant he had officially told the school they couldn't afford tuition, all while booking a beach house in Florida. My phone started buzzing again while I was still staring at the spreadsheet. Ryan was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text popped up, "Call me," "It's not what you think," I didn't answer. About a minute later, Kayla texted, "We can explain." Explain what? By noon, my mom left me a voicemail saying I was overreacting and that Ryan was embarrassed I had contacted the school. Embarrassed. That word stayed with me. I finally called Ryan later that afternoon. I put him on speaker and set my phone down on my desk. He started talking right away. He said he'd been planning to tell me about the scholarships. Said things had just gotten complicated. He claimed the hardship paperwork was something the school encouraged them to file so they could qualify for more aid. I asked him one question. How much did the beach trip cost? There was a long pause. Then he said most of it was covered with credit card points. A friend gave them a discount on the rental. Flights were cheap. I asked again. I wanted an actual number. He said around $12,000 total, but added that they didn't pay it all at once. 12,000. I told him that over the last 3 years, I'd sent more than $40,000. He said that wasn't fair. He said that money was for the kids. Exactly. So I asked where the rest of it went, the difference between what tuition really cost and what I had been sending. He said it helped with living expenses. Groceries, school clothes, just everyday stuff. I reminded him that he had told the school he couldn't afford tuition at all. He changed his tone almost immediately. He said I was being transactional. That family isn't supposed to keep score, that he never forced me to help in the first place. That part almost made me laugh. Then he said if I felt used, that was my fault for making assumptions. I stayed calm. I told him I needed some space and that I wouldn't be sending the August tuition payment. He went quiet. After a moment, he asked what that meant for the kids. I told him I didn't know yet. That night, Kayla's Facebook account went private. The beach photos disappeared. And the next morning, I got a call I wasn't expecting at all. It was the school's finance director. She asked if I was aware that some of my contributions had been reallocated the previous semester, beyond tuition. That was the moment this stopped being about a vacation. When she called, I stepped into an empty conference room at work and closed the door behind me. She introduced herself as Mrs. Peterson and confirmed who I was. Then, very carefully, she asked if I understood how my payments had been applied. I told her I believed they were paying tuition. There was a short pause. She explained that while most of my transfers had gone toward tuition, one large payment from the previous spring had been redirected at the request of the primary account holder. The primary account holder was Ryan. I asked where the money had been redirected. She said the school allows overpayments to be moved into auxiliary accounts for approved educational expenses, things like enrichment programs, travel opportunities, or special school events. For a second, my mind just went blank. I asked her to be specific. She said that back in April, $5,000 from one of my payments had been applied to an international educational travel program scheduled for the upcoming summer. International. I asked which student. There was another pause. Then she said, neither. It was listed under Parent Leadership Development Summit. For a second, I honestly thought she had the wrong account. I asked her to repeat that. She did. Apparently, the school hosts a week-long conference in Europe every year for selected parents involved in fundraising and advisory programs. It includes workshops, networking events, and cultural outings. The cost per attendee was just under $5,000. Ryan had registered for it using my overpayment. I asked if the program was required. She said no, it was optional and highly competitive. I thanked her for explaining and ended the call. Then I just sat there in the conference room, staring at the wall for a long time. While I'd been budgeting carefully, skipping vacations, and telling myself I was investing in my niece and nephew's future, my brother had used my money to secure himself a spot at a leadership summit in Europe. And he never mentioned it. I went back to my desk and checked my email again. There was an invoice attached from last April that I'd never opened. I had always trusted the total shown at the top and never looked at the itemized details. Buried underneath the tuition line was another charge. Parent Summit Program fee, $5,000. Paid in full. My phone started buzzing again. This time it was Ryan. It was Kayla. She asked if we could talk, woman to woman. She said Ryan was falling apart and that I was making the situation worse. She told me the summit was an investment, networking that could help expand their business connections. She said I was misunderstanding everything, that these were business connections. Ryan works at an auto shop. Kayla sells candles online. I didn't respond. Instead, I emailed the school again. I asked that any future payments from me require written authorization before being applied to anything other than tuition. I also asked whether refunds were possible for funds that had been misallocated. About an hour later, my mom showed up at my condo building. She never drives to Chicago. She called me from the lobby and said we needed to fix this before I ruined Ryan's opportunity. Opportunity, that was the word she used. I went downstairs to meet her. She didn't hug me. She just said I was being cold and that Ryan finally had something for himself. For himself. I asked if she knew about the summit. She said yes. She told me he deserved it after everything he'd been through. I asked what exactly he had been through. She didn't answer. Instead, she said that if I pulled my funding now, the school might reassess their financial aid package, and that could put the kids' enrollment at risk. It wasn't a request. It sounded like a warning. And that was the moment I understood this wasn't only about money. They had built their entire situation around the assumption that I would never ask questions. Now the school was waiting on my decision about the $5,000 summit fee. If I asked for a refund, Ryan would lose his spot in Europe. If I didn't, I'd officially be paying for his vacation, just labeled as leadership training. I had 24 hours to decide. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that word, opportunity. Like somehow I was blocking something meaningful instead of something that, honestly, felt ridiculous. By morning, I had made my decision. I called the school and asked to speak with Mrs. Peterson again. I told her I wanted the $5,000 refunded and sent back to the original payment source. I also asked for written confirmation that none of my future payments could be redirected without my direct approval. She didn't argue or push back. She simply said she would start the process and notify the account holder. The account holder. Ryan. It took about 18 minutes for my phone to start blowing up. Ryan called 4 times in a row. Then Kayla called, then my mom. I let every call go unanswered. Finally, Ryan sent a text. Please tell me you didn't do that. I replied with one sentence. I did. He called again immediately. This time I answered. He wasn't yelling. He went straight into pleading. He said the summit committee had already confirmed his spot. He said he'd told people he was going. Pulling out now, he said, would make him look unreliable. I asked why he signed up without telling me. He said he assumed I'd want him to grow. Grow into what? He said connections matter. That he was thinking long-term. He said I'm always strategic, so he didn't understand why he couldn't be. I told him strategic doesn't mean secret. Then his tone shifted again. He said if the refund went through, the school might reassess their hardship package. The scholarships could be affected if the family's financial contribution changed. Suddenly, it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the kids. He said if Mason and Leia had to leave the school because of this, it would devastate them. So I asked him one question. If I had never logged into that portal, would you have ever told me? He didn't answer. Later that afternoon, my mom called again. She said I was humiliating him. She said men need wins. She accused me of being controlling with money. That part almost impressed me. For 3 years, I had quietly wired money twice a year. There had never been conditions. No audits, no oversight. And now I was the one being called controlling. Then Kayla sent me something that shifted everything. A screenshot. It was a group chat between her, Ryan, and someone saved in her phone as board chair Mark. Mark had written that if Ryan backed out of the summit this late, it could reflect poorly on the family's commitment to the academy community. Family's commitment. Right below that, Kayla had replied, "We're trying to manage my sister-in-law, she's overreacting." Manage me, not talk to me, not explain things, manage. That was the moment I realized this went beyond tuition, or even the summit. Ryan had worked his way into the school's parent leadership circle. He was building a reputation there, and my money was what made it possible. Without my payments, there was no hardship story. Without that hardship story, there was no narrative about overcoming financial struggle. And without that, there was no summit invitation. I hadn't just been helping with education. I had been funding his image. At 6 o'clock that evening, Mrs. Peterson emailed to confirm that the refund request had been approved and was being processed. 10 minutes later, Ryan called again. This time, there was no pleading. He said that if I followed through and stopped paying in August, He would tell the kids why they had to leave the school. He said he'd make sure they knew it was my decision. That was the first time it felt like a direct threat, and something shifted for me right then. It stopped being about guilt. It became about leverage. And I realized, for the first time, that I had some too. When Ryan said he would tell Mason and Leia it was my fault if they had to leave the school, I didn't argue. I just said, "Do what you think is right." Then I hung up. He expected me to back down. I didn't. Instead, I went back and started reviewing everything from the beginning. The first semester, before I was added as an authorized payer, I had sent Ryan $8,000 directly so he could secure the kids' enrollment. After that, every payment went straight to the school. I pulled up the hardship approval notes again. The income listed there was much lower than what Ryan had previously told me he made, which meant one of two things. Either he lied to me, or he misrepresented his finances to the school. I called a friend of mine who works in auditing and asked a general question about financial hardship applications and what happens when outside financial support isn't fully disclosed. He told me that if regular contributions aren't reported properly, aid packages can be revoked. Then I called the school and asked directly whether my yearly payments had been documented as ongoing financial support during the hardship review process. There was a pause on the line. Later that afternoon, the finance director called me back. She explained that Ryan's file mentioned occasional family assistance, not consistent payments in the thousands. Occasional. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I texted Ryan, "Before you decide what to tell the kids, you should know the school is reviewing your hardship disclosures." He called immediately. This time, he wasn't defensive. He sounded worried. He said that if their aid package was reassessed, they might owe tuition adjustments going back 2 years. I told him that sounded serious. Then he asked what I wanted. I said we needed a meeting, him, Kayla, me, and someone from the school's finance office. Complete transparency about every payment and every dollar. If he refused, I would stop all future support and provide documentation of every transfer I'd made. He said that would destroy their reputation at the academy. I told him that wasn't my responsibility. He asked for 24 hours to figure things out. I agreed. For the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel angry. I felt in control. Ryan didn't even wait 24 hours. He showed up at my condo the next evening by himself. No Kayla, no kids, no big scene. He just texted to say he was downstairs and asked if we could talk. When he walked in, he looked exhausted. Not angry, not defensive, just cornered. He said he never meant for things to get this far. When the scholarships came through, he said it felt like relief. And when the hardship aid was approved, it felt like they'd been given a second chance. He told me he convinced himself that my help meant they could finally breathe a little. I asked if breathing included beach houses and trips to Europe. He didn't really answer that. Instead, he admitted something I wasn't expecting. The summit wasn't about business. It wasn't about networking. It was about status. He said most of the parents at the academy were doctors, attorneys, executives, people with titles and influence. He said he always felt out of place around them. Getting invited to the summit made him feel legitimate, like he actually belonged in those rooms, so he used what he had. My consistency. My reliability. My money. He said he never planned to exclude me from the vacation. He just didn't want to deal with questions about how they could afford it. At least that part sounded honest. I told him the school was already reviewing the hardship file. If they decided the financial disclosures weren't accurate, they could revoke the aid and demand repayment. I made it clear I wasn't going to lie to cover for him. He nodded. Then he asked if I was really willing to let the kids lose their place at the school over this. That was the first moment it actually hurt. Because the truth is, I love Mason and Leia. None of this was ever about them, so I told him my terms. I would continue paying tuition directly to the school. Tuition only, no extra payments, no overages, nothing beyond that. I would also be formally listed as a financial sponsor in the school's records, with full disclosure. And he would withdraw from the summit on his own and submit a written correction to the hardship file, clearly stating that there had been consistent family financial support. If the school adjusted their aid because of it, he agreed to cover the difference himself, without expecting me to contribute. And one more thing, he promised he would never tell the kids this was my fault. He sat there quietly for a long time. Then he asked what would happen if he refused. I told him plainly, I would stop funding immediately, and if the school needed clarification, I would provide documentation of every payment. No yelling, no threats, just facts. The next morning, Mrs. Peterson emailed me. Ryan had withdrawn from the summit and requested an amendment to his financial disclosure. 2 days later, the $5,000 refund hit my account. My mom hasn't called since. Kayla hasn't either. Ryan still texts, but now it's just about the kids. Tuition statements come straight from the school, with my name clearly listed as the sponsor. And the beach photos never came back. What I learned is simple. Kindness without boundaries becomes someone else's leverage.